Evening. It's a real honour to be here. Venerable members of the clergy, courageous educators and mindful friends, many of whom I have, some of whom I haven't seen since I visited you in Colombo. Was it 3 years ago, Tara? Something like that. A trip I remember very fondly. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. I would like to cover these things. I'm going to post this into the chat, so you have some sense of what I'm hoping to cover. Apologies for those watching on the recording. A welcome to you. But I'm going to be looking at our definition of mindfulness and how it isn't itself value free, that there are values already within it. I'm going to be looking at how mindfulness in science seems to underpin pro-social values, but most importantly, I'm going to look at how, particularly perhaps in the UK and Europe, mindfulness training in schools has started to include much more explicit components focused on values education or pro-social values, before covering a little bit about how mindfulness is integrated into some other values-based school initiatives, how there's a potential for sort of ethical learning that goes beyond just pro-social values, that's actually about behavior that Rinpoche has spoken about, and then talking about some of the limitations that we've found in this work. So, firstly, mindfulness, in our definition, is awareness of what's going on inside of us and around us, but of a particular quality, and it has to be this particular quality. It isn't just bare awareness. At least this is the emphasis that we have in the UK and in Europe. It might be slightly different in the US in some cases. So we say the qualities need to be openness, curiosity, kindness, and care. And so if it hasn't got those things, then it isn't mindfulness. It's attention training, perhaps, awareness training of a form, but not mindfulness. And so a thief or a sniper would not be mindful in our definition, because they're failing to embody that core attitude of kindness. And there are other definitions I'm aware of, and sometimes, therefore, you need to combine mindfulness and compassion together. So that's kind of our definition, and that's the emphasis that teachers are encouraged to embody when they're delivering mindfulness in schools. Already, kindness is there. Secondly, there is evidence, particularly with adults, but increasingly with young people, that mindfulness training, even without explicit sort of compassion components, does underpin social and emotional skills like self-awareness, positive self-concept, and skills for self-management, emotion regulation, motivation and persistence. And these resource us, underpin our ability to then reach out to others in a positive way, or interact with others in a positive way. And more directly, it seems to impact on empathy, compassion, caring, and a sense of responsibility. So if you're interested in some of the science behind this, we have a publication coming up in the next few weeks, which will be on our website, which is themindfulnessinitiative.org. And there'll be a document that backs up some of that research. So what is happening, however, so given that mindfulness seems to, in some way, even if it's slight and a small effect, underpin values, pro-social values. However, there's recognition across the sector that this could be improved. There might be a slight effect, but this could be more explicit and more powerful. And there's also, I think, more permission in schools to start looking at training the heart as well as the mind. Like one of the easiest things to go into schools with first was, attention and sitting down and resourcing people for learning. But now there is a shift towards, valuing values and the cultivation of the heart. So most of the courses, I would say, now have explicit components treating gratitude and forgiveness or compassion, if not all of them. So the most popular one in the UK, Mindfulness in Schools, Gratitude and Forgiveness. And there are also others such as Mind with Heart, which very explicitly include compassion. And the clues in the title, Mind with Heart, is trying to do both. And there's a mindfulness-based program for young people called Compassion from the Compassionate Mind Foundation at the University of Derby, near where I live in the north of England. So a lot of these programs are combining different elements, and some of them have been created in order to fit within other initiatives. So moving on to now my next topic. So how mindfulness is being integrated in other values-based initiatives. So mindfulness is helpful as a kind of enabler. My colleague, Professor Catherine Weir, talks about it as a kind of lubricant. We call it WD-40 is our kind of brand name. She says it's the WD-40 in education. So it provides a kind of way of embodying and resourcing kids to reflect on some of these learnings which might otherwise just be theoretical or conceptual. So when looking at sort of social emotional learning, for instance, it kind of resources it to be a much more kind of embodied and transformative practice. As well as social emotional learning, and there's a big emphasis in the UK on understanding neuroscience and connecting with nature. And both of these things, teachers and researchers think mindfulness is helpful for making it a kind of more experiential inquiry rather than just a kind of theoretical, didactic learning exercise. So I'd like to focus on two of these values-based initiatives. First one is social emotional learning, and the second one is what they call a whole school approach to culture and values. So social emotional learning is very, very popular in the US, particularly, and to some extent in the UK, and it can be defined as the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. So a lot of those things which Rinpoche has talked about in other terms, and the Venerable Dhammajiva also. In England, at least, social emotional learning is sometimes broadened to be described as relationships and sex education and spiritual, moral, social, and cultural development. It sounds quite grand, and I wish it delivered on this more of the time. I wish we did have social, morals, cultural, and spiritual development, but there is. It is increasingly the case that this social and emotional learning, our ability to regulate ourselves, understand our emotions, connect with others, being a bit more pro-social, is paired with values and ethical objectives. UK schools are increasingly encouraged to explicitly cultivate certain values to help civic and democratic society, and this is from the kind of the government list, including tolerance, defense of human rights, protection of the vulnerable groups, and the conservation of the environment. Now, this social emotional learning, or you might have come across if you read anything about the UK sector, it's often called PSHE. I think it's personal social health education. is a kind of, it has very recently become, this has recently become a standard or required in UK schools. And mindfulness is a potentially a key part of this process, by, like I say, making it experiential, and also bringing, kind of experiential inquiry of kindness, compassion, gratitude, and connection. So, so yes, mindfulness has a real potential of being combined with social emotional learning, and with these other sort of existing values programs. So the second thing I wanted to address is the other initiative is the whole school approach. So this is the teaching theory that treats the whole ecosystem, and I think this really touches upon the hidden curriculum, which the Venerable Dhammajiva mentioned, and that is, how does the whole school work in order to develop children? How can this be understood not just as individual learning and resourcing, but as a cultural ecosystem that involves parents and teachers and children? And here, mindfulness has a real key role to play. Again, like that sort of the lubricant in the system. Mindfulness can be the lubricant, or perhaps a dynamic cog in the engine of school life, helping to facilitate lots of different aspects of a healthy ecology, including, increasingly mindfulness training programs, are being encouraged to take this approach because the evidence seems to show that they're more effective in those circumstances. And so, so yes, what would this look like? Well, mindfulness can help, might not be the thing that you say, we're going to be a mindful school and this will be our whole school thing. It could be, we want to be an open-minded, tolerant, caring and responsible school, and we want to have open-minded, tolerant, caring and responsible children. Mindfulness can be something that makes that not just a wish list, but actually something that is an embodied training that teachers particularly are more able to embody more of the time, because you make it a personal cultivation rather than just an aspiration. Okay, so I'd like to move on to my fifth subject here, and that is looking at the potential, and for the moment in the UK and Europe at least, this is still just a potential for mindfulness not just to develop pro-social values, so that's the value of caring, the value of compassion, and the cultivation of heart to make that a more daily reality, but actually inquiry into ethics, which yes, the Venerable Dhammajiva mentioned in terms of hiri and ottappa, moral dread and moral shame, and how do we inquire into actual behavior and action? Now, this is really early days in terms of mindfulness programs that explicitly do this, but there are some encouraging there are some encouraging examples from the US particularly. So Emory University has developed SEE learning, that's SEE, social, emotional and ethical learning. And so they combine attention training, compassion and ethical discernment with systems thinking. So seeing ourselves as smaller parts of a whole, and that our actions matter, and seeing how we are conditioned and we condition in turn the society that we live in. And also bringing in aspects of sort of trauma-informed thinking. So I'm really excited about this project and other similar innovations, because as I described, mindfulness itself is not value neutral in our definition. It seems to underpin pro-social values. It's increasingly explicitly combined with pro-social value, sort of compassion elements, and in the future may also be better combined with stuff that looks at behavior and ethics and who we want to be and how we, how we act in the world. There is some stuff going on in the UK around nature connection and in ecological environmental ethics and mindfulness already. So in my last minute, I would like to mention what's kind of holding us back here. There's a lot of stuff I've mentioned. Mindfulness itself, in the Mindfulness in Schools project program, they think it takes sort of a 12-week curriculum with home practice and sort of to get a discernible result or a strong result on mindfulness and kids' ability to understand their own emotions in a kind of metacognitive perspective, to have a bit more self-regulation, etc. It's already a lot for them to learn in a short amount of time. To then say we're also going to bring in compassion and we're also going to bring in care and empathy explicitly, and we're also going to bring in ethics, etc. It's asking for a lot, it will not be possible to deliver on all that potential whilst we only give it 12 sessions on, in one particular year, unless it's something that kids are being taught throughout their whole careers. Mindfulness and social emotional learning will continue to be what we call a Cinderella subject. I don't know whether Cinderella is a fairy tale that's known widely in Sri Lanka, but the story of, someone who's kept in the basement and hidden away and then has one moment out in the ball, but basically at midnight she has to go because her chariot or her becomes a pumpkin. Mindfulness or social emotional learning can be a little bit like Cinderella, and gets a little moment, but is otherwise sort of hidden away and doesn't get to realize that its full potential. So that's what really needs to change. There needs to be a kind of a change in the way that we see education and a balancing of yes, information, knowledge and skills are really important, but there's also this dimension of inner growth that needs to be radically different, balanced with skills and knowledge. Otherwise, is asking a lot too much, perhaps, for a mindfulness course to create the children of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Jamie. Next, I would like to invite